Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to discuss the Karen archetype, the Karen meme that's become popular in the last few years. Of course, before it was Karen, it was the soccer mom, this idea like this middle-aged, maybe middle-class woman, white woman, I guess, who goes around and complains about things and makes service workers' lives a living hell. We've all seen the clips online. So we're going to discuss the Karen archetype, what it is exactly, why. I think the more important question there is why it's become stigmatized, how to be a Karen in a healthy way, because I think there's a healthy way to do it. And, why do we just discuss these cultural things is because what's going on out in culture, it says something about us. And I think what this says about us is what stagnation. Yeah, we're going to use the discussion of the Karen archetype, the Karen meme. We're going to just kind of trickle these facts and truths down into that will inform what stagnation and entitlement are. And so if we ever find ourselves stagnant or feeling entitled, where these things really come from, what they are, and how they're actually it seems counterintuitive or paradoxical, but that's what a lot of things are in psychology. They're going to be two sides of the same coin. Plus, I think I have an interesting take on this because I, in fact, am a Karen. I will tell you to be quiet in a restaurant if you're too loud. No problem with that. Which doesn't happen often. And it's not like, oh, if I can hear you, I'll tell you to be quiet. It may happen once a year. Like if you leave dog poop on the sidewalk, I'm going to tell you to pick it up. I mean, honestly, if you don't do that, like we're probably not going to be friends. And what else do I do? Like when people cut in line, I guess, but that's obvious. And, not like these things happen a lot. I mean, the people cutting in line thing, I think the last time that happened must have been 2017, and it was teenagers, and, teenagers are stupid. But if I see something wrong, I like to tell people about it. I think that's okay to do. I think I do it in mostly a healthy way. I've done it in unhealthy ways. We may get to it, but so I think it's okay to be a Karen. It's just about how you do it. And we'll discuss a few ways on how to go from if you are a bad Karen, or if you want to be a good Karen and not a bad Karen. If you want to if you're kind of jealous of Karen, like, man, I wish I could just stand in front of a parking spot if I think that it's mine somehow, and maybe it is hers. Like I want to be that assertive, but I want to do it in a maybe a healthier way. We'll talk about that. So first, what is a Karen? Right, it's said that this middle-aged woman, I guess a white woman who's sensitive, entitled, yells at people. Her coffee isn't ready soon enough, or it's too hot or too cold, and she's making a big stink about it. This is an archetype, and archetypes exist for a reason, right? Because they inform something about who we are. We don't just pull these out of our butt. We look at the king, warrior, magician, lover, squaring the circle diagram, and there's the white knight archetype, there's the lover, there's the magician, there's the jester, and we can look at all the archetypes and go, yeah, I know one of those, I know one of those. Now, we're more than one archetype, but each person is their own integration of these general patterns that we see in humanity. So, man, if these patterns keep cropping up, it must say something about who we are, culturally. Perhaps even what we are, metaphysically. And I think what the Karen does is it signifies something very real going on right now. And that thing is a fear of ostracism, a fear of looking uncool, a fear of doing the wrong thing, a fear of not being with it, a fear of upsetting people, a fear of, you don't want to be that guy or that girl. A fear of just not getting it. Like, what don't you get? You don't know because you don't get it. And we see these Karens with these haircuts freaking out on people, and part of us thinks, oh, well, I think, now that I'm thinking about it, we think, well, at least I'm not that bad. So we justify our life in that way, which is really sad. But we also say, look, I don't know what I want in life, or maybe I do know what I want, but I know I don't want to be that. Right, so I think I'm going after something in a certain direction, but also in the back of my mind, I definitely don't want to be what a Karen is. And this could lead to what appears to be healthy behavior, but may in fact be unhealthy, deranged, neurotic, isolating, shame-based kind of behavior and thinking. It's interesting when I first started to think about this. My first analysis, I hate to admit, was, oh, maybe Karen's a psyop. it's a psyop by the elites that, I didn't really think that, but it's a psyop by the elites that keeps people docile, that keeps people from pointing out what they see as wrong. That keeps people from saying that the emperor has no clothes. That's why it's created. But it's like, no, dude, you're reversing cause and effect. This is just an aside on the anatomy of conspiracy theories. Of conspiracy theory thinking. I was thinking, if that was Mike Cernovich, I would have that, ooh, it's a psyop explanation. No, it's triggering for us because we have that issue. Like if you go into a job interview and issues keep getting triggered, whatever your issue insecurity is, it's not the people in the job interview doing it. They're not out to get you. I know it may seem that way, but it's just because you don't have that issue managed. Or very similar. The argument for creationism. The sun is that far away. It's 93 million miles away. It's the perfect distance from Earth to make life very conducive to humans. So God must exist. God must have put the sun there. It's like, no, I think you're reversing cause and effect. We evolved on Earth to be who we are, to be what we are, because the sun is that far away. I'm not saying God doesn't exist, right? I'm very Jungian on this. I don't believe in God. I know God exists, but I don't know. I don't think he put the sun. He didn't put the sun there. Well, depends what you mean by he, right? So I think part of the Karen archetype and why this has become so triggering for a lot of us is it dovetail with like the first world problems thing. Like, oh, you don't get to complain about that. Oh, your coffee's too hot. Well, there's these people in Somalia, whatever. They have it way worse than you have. And oh, you're doing like your ice bath thing and your health routine. That's not a real thing. That's not a real problem. Right, like you didn't go to jiu-jitsu today and you're, little cranky. That's not a real problem. You don't get to complain about that. Oh, you have a lot of money. How can you really know what pain is if you don't have money? You have that emotion. No, you don't get to have that emotion. And I think stigmatizing the Karen comes down to that. But I understand why we do it from other reasons, right? Because there's a Central Park bird watching incident which happened May 25th, 2020. Did I already say that, or did I just think it? I just thought that. Because it was the same day that George Floyd was killed or died, depending on how you see that. And so this white woman, which matters because this is racial, or at least we made it racial. It may not be racial, I think that's up to these two people and their therapist. But we made it racial culturally, so that says something about who we are. So it's this white woman in Central Park with her Cocker Spaniel, with her rescue Cocker Spaniel, and she's 41 and single, no husband, no kids. That may play into this. And she let her dog off in a part of the park, Central Park, where you're not supposed to have your dog off leash. And then there's this bird watcher, a black guy. I mean, by the way, if you're a black guy who's a bird watcher, like I'm not saying you're not black, but also you're not black, but you're also whiter than I am somehow. If you're a black guy who's a bird watcher, and he's really annoyed when there's dogs off leash because I guess they come over and they bother them while they're watching birds, and he's been doing this for a while. And then the dogs probably scare birds away. So he's developed a technique. Maybe at one point he tried to communicate with people and say, hey, could you just put your dog on the leash? I don't know. I'm not saying it justifies this technique, but he's developed a technique where what he'll do is he will offer food or give a little treat to the dog, which of course freaks people out, especially people who are 41 and they think that their dog is their child and they don't have any other family. And it freaks, and so people will put their dogs on leash. So it's kind of like terror, it's like a subtle threat that you do to the dog. And I'm sure people mostly comply and they put their dog on the leash after that. But this woman, she freaked out. She freaked out and called the police and said that there's this, she doesn't say black man. I mean, not that, but it kind of shows her mindset. She's on the police, she's on the phone with the police and saying there's an African American man who's threatening me or my dog. And yeah, she was wrong too. Like, she shouldn't have had her dog off leash, but also he's committing terrorism. I mean, that's what that is. It's like trying to use fear to get people to do the right thing, and it triggered the wrong person at the wrong time. Right? Usually, when there's 100% of the time when there's a conflict like this, it's not one person's totally innocent and the other one's an idiot. It's they're both idiots. So he gave her a subtle threat. She freaked out. Her life is not going well. I mean, I guess she had to leave the country, and he's going around giving speeches. So that's where we get this Karen archetype from. There's maybe a racial component to it. It may not be. But clearly there's more going on here. Right? Clearly there's more going on, and I think that there's an indication that there's more going on with the Karen archetype. I mean, by the way, this may be an important fact about her, but I think that this is relevant. So she was born in 1979, Amy Cooper. She was 41 at the time of this incident. From 2008 to 2012, she dated this guy who was married, and then they broke up. And then after they broke up, she lent him money. She lent him $65,000 that she tried to sue him for, and she didn't win. Oh, man. I mean, that's the issue, right? You're lending your ex-boyfriend money, $65,000. Even if it's $1, that's still a huge issue, right? So there's just a lot of misplaced affection, probably due to codependence. I don't know. That's between her and her therapist, whatever. So this indicates that there's more going on. We heard one story about this one Karen that made it a popular archetype, but I think there's more things going on. And yeah, you can be a bad Karen. You can also be a good Karen. It comes down to how you do it or why you do it. This concept that we bring up on this show often is it what's the intention? Is it the intention to fill? Are you letting people know what you want them to do because of a healthy need or because it's an unhealthy need? A healthy need is a need that you have because you have it for no other reason than you have it. An unhealthy need is a need you have because you think when you get that thing, it'll make up for your insecurity. And I think this is a great distinction because the same existential need can be exactly the same, but the intention, the reason why you have that existential need can make it either a healthy need or unhealthy need. Like the example I always give is the guy who wants a girlfriend. Do you want a girlfriend because you want to connect with somebody? Just to put it generally. Or do you want a girlfriend because you think if you get a girlfriend, your friends will think you're cool? Or people will stop making fun of you? Same goal, same existential goal, two completely different mentalities going into it. The one guy is just never going to find a girl who's good enough because he's always trying to use her to justify him, to validate him. She's going to have these huge boundary problems. He's going to think, oh, women are this way, and women today in modern culture. The other guy is going to find a good girlfriend for him in about 3 months if he lives in a somewhat major metropolitan city. I mean, even probably something like Boise. Probably going to find a girlfriend in about 3 months. It's easier for me to say that now, but that's, I'm 41 and past all that. Maybe. But it's true. That's true. That's how it is. So how do you ensure that you're going to be a good Karen? What are a few steps that we can take to ensure this? And also the money example. I think that's just a good, money is a tool. Money is very useful. Do you want money because it's this useful tool, the same reason you'd want a nice hammer? Or do you want it so you look cool and people think you're a big shot? You drive you get your car all souped up. I just saw a car like that. And it's just kind of embarrassing at this point to see that. But anyways, so how do you ensure that you're going to be a good Karen? The first thing you do, which kind of implied before, is you need to manage your triggers, especially your resentment, especially unresolved, unprocessed, unspoken anger. Because that's what's going to trigger the adrenal response, and that's clearly what happened with this Amy Cooper lady at the Central Park birdwatching incident that instigated, the resurgence of this Karen archetype, is she was having a panic attack. And I know I've said this before, but when you're a woman who's 43, I guess 41. I always used to say 43. And you wanted children and you wanted a family and you are slowly beginning to realize you don't have that. And at the same time, she also had this, great, it seems like she was doing very well. I mean, she could afford to lend her ex-boyfriend $65,000. Boy, it's okay. I mean, I say that with empathy. I understand where she's coming from. But, oh man. So there's this dissonance, right? Like on one level, you're living this great life in New York, and probably a lot of your friends from your hometown think, oh, Amy, she's out there living this great life, but I mean, she's freaking miserable. I mean, she's codependent to the gills. It's going to be very difficult for her, and she's probably using this cushy, not cushy, but this high profile finance job to like make her feel better in some way. There's a lot of things there that have gone unresolved for this white lady in the Central Park birdwatching incident. And so she is taking her resentment that she has clearly not processed about that, I would assume, and dumping it on this guy who, yeah, he should not have been committing this terrorism, but also doesn't seem like he deserved to have the cops call on me. I'm not saying she called on the cops because she was black. Maybe that was the reason. That's between her and her therapist. I don't know. So that's what you do. And that's how you depersonalize these things. This is why we take things personally, because if we're at a restaurant and somebody is talking loudly, we say, oh, this means something about me. What we're really saying, even though we don't know it, is, oh, I have resentment that's being triggered by this person out there. And now when I go and talk with them, I'm making it about my resentment, when really the healthy way to do it is just make it about, I would have a more pleasant dinner. I would be able to hear myself think if you were a little bit more quiet. Same need. One is totally healthy, the other is completely unhealthy. It's all about the intention behind it. The other thing I would say is just talk to people in general. Just talk to people in general. I mean, don't just, the problem is when we criticize people who are, sensitive, then we don't want to be sensitive ourselves. So when little things happen, or, even if they're good things, we're not sensitive to that. And so so the emotion's not there on the surface, and then we don't communicate it. And so we only end up communicating with strangers in public places when we have, some adrenal response, some trauma triggered, the trauma of years and years of codependence, and, now putting all these maternal instincts onto this dog. Now that's coming up and that's being triggered, but it's not just happening in that moment, right? It's years and years of just not being sensitive, not being tuned into the environment in general, because you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be weird. You don't want to say anything that's socially strange or awkward. You don't want the other person to think you're uncool. Like, oh, I like their shoes. I want to tell them that they have cool shoes. Oh, but that's kind of stupid and lame, and it makes me seem needy. All these things that you put into it until you're isolated and just chock full of shame. Then some trauma gets triggered, right? And I guess this all goes hand in hand. Like, do it in a nice way. Like, you can say nice things to people too. And I say this because I was actually just at the grocery store, and I think it's good to talk to people at the grocery store, because that's really your community. And seemed like a nice family dynamic, and I really wanted to say something, but I didn't. I mean, I just kind of tuned out there. But later, I'm like, oh yeah, I really wanted to say something. And now and you know what it was, now that I'm thinking about it, it was a mom and her daughter, and the daughter was home from college, probably her freshman year. And they're out shopping, having a great time, talking with each other. You could tell that, like whatever arguments they had when the daughter was, 14 about the length of her bangs or something, like that's all in the past. They're on their way to being friends now. And they got a call from their dad. And it was something about when he was going to be home and when they were going to meet him there, and just it seemed really nice and loving. And I went and say, like, man, you guys sound like you have a great family. I'm going to leave my family be part of your family. It's like just something small like that, but I didn't say it. Like, you can say stuff like that. Connect with people in positive ways too. I mean, I think just making this I think that's just a good way to acknowledge that you're both humans on this planet and you both have this same sense of goodwill. I mean, am I sounding like a fruitcake? Well, I think this is the truth. And so what does this mean about stagnation and entitlement? Well, the main reason that people are stagnant and the main reason people are entitled, it seems paradoxical, right? But it's really not. They're two sides of the same coin, is because they don't want to be caring. Right? Stagnation is what happens when you want something in life and you genuinely want it, but also you don't want something to happen. You don't want to be a Karen. And your pull towards not being a Karen is a little bit stronger than your pull to being, whatever it is, that thing that you want, and then you find yourself just, going around in circles. And it creates this really strong dissonance that's stressful, and it can wear on you. And the worst part is when that stress feels like it's part of existence, right? Like the fish not knowing what water is. It just makes life really difficult, right? Like you want to change and improve, but also you don't want people to disapprove of you, right? And holding those two thoughts is going to make it very difficult to change. Or you want a girlfriend or a boyfriend, but you don't want to look stupid. It doesn't work that way. If you want to find somebody who you love and somebody you can connect with, you're going to look stupid. That's par for the course. Or, like anything. I want a certain career, but I don't want to come off as, I want to be in finance. Oh, but I don't want to be a douchey finance guy, so I'm not going to do that. Something to that effect, and this really creates a lot of stagnation. And same thing with entitlement. I know people, it's like become popular to complain about how we're entitled. Oh, these Karens are entitled. Kids these days, millennials, Gen Zers, they're all entitled. But in truth, and this is not my opinion, in truth, the entitlement isn't really entitlement. It's what seems to be entitlement, but it's really a compensation for a deep feeling of insecurity. What that entitlement is, same thing with this Amy Cooper lady, this white lady in the Central Park birdwatching incident. What her entitlement was, clearly when you look at her life, was there are very serious, deep needs in her life not going met, and she has no idea why. And she did what she was supposed to do. She got this great career, but clearly there's a codependent issue, and it makes it even worse, right? Like if you don't do anything to improve your life and you don't get your needs met, if you don't work at it, well, then there's no dissonance. But when there's dissonance, it makes it even worse. And so the compensation for this is to freak the F out on people. And that's exactly what she did. And that's what I see when I work with people and look at what would look like entitlement to other people. Where that really comes from is there are very important needs there that you didn't get met when you were a child, and that's not your fault, but it is your responsibility, of course, to work on those issues now. And so it creates this negative feedback loop, right? Like, it's wrong to be entitled, so when you go out and you feel like you should tell somebody not to pick up their poop, like, who am I to say, like, whether they should pick up their dog's poop? Hopefully they need to pick up their own poop. In certain parts of LA, definitely New York, that was the issue. You're like, oh, well, I don't want to be entitled. I'm a millennial. I don't want to come off like a stereotypical millennial. I don't want to be entitled. So you just repress that, and it gets worse and worse. And then the compensation for that is going to become worse and worse as well. Look, this all stems from us not really understanding what psychology is, not having firm definitions really nailed down, firm constructs. Like, how do we really differentiate between unhealthy and unhealthy needs? How do we do that in the clinic? Because that's really important. And if you can't do that, any kind of psychological growth that you're going to have is just, it's not going to happen for you. You're just going to go around in circles, and you're going to have all these concepts and clarify different parts of your life. But it's not going to make sense. It's not going to fit together in a coherent whole. So that's what we can help you with here. So we do free consultations if you want to clear up any of your psychological issues. Especially like if you've been to therapy already and you kind of have an idea what's going on, but it's also at the same time more confusing. or you don't feel like your life's changing, we might be able to help you out. Free consultations, animusempire.com/schedule. Just reach out. My goal is to learn about you, and you can ask me questions if you just want to talk about something. Right? Yeah. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you guys. And I, go out and let people know what you want. Just try not to be a Karen about it.